There is a plant growing in the unseen corners of the American continent that the Spanish Inquisition once tried to erase from the face of the earth. It produces a grain so small it looks like sand, yet it once fed an empire of 5 million people and was so important that some civilizations once considered it as the flesh of the gods. It contains more calcium than milk, more iron than spinach, and is one of the few plants on the planet to provide all 9 essential amino acids in a single seed. To the Aztecs, amaranth grain was the food of immortality. To the Spanish conquistadors, it was a pagan parody of the Holy Eucharist, a demonic grain that had to be destroyed. They would go on to burn 10,000 hectares of it, decreeing that anyone caught growing it would have their hands amputated. For 5 centuries, it was pushed into the shadows, surviving only as an invasive pest known as pigweed. But today, that same weed is being grown in the pressurized greenhouses of NASA. The plant that the Spanish tried to bury in the mud is now the primary candidate for the first human colonies on Mars. This is the story of a plant that refused to die, the sacred resistance of the Aztec farmers, and the biochemical engine that is preparing to feed humanity among the stars. In the Central Valley of Mexico in 1450 stood one of the most advanced urban centers the world has ever seen. While European cities were drowning in their own waste, this metropolis of 200,000 people was a marvel of engineering, clean water, and agricultural stability. At the center of this stability was not just corn, but a grain called huautli. But today we know it as amaranth. In the Aztec tribute records, specifically the Florentine Codex, the scale of this plant's importance is abundantly clear. Every year, 17 provinces were required to send a staggering 20,000 tons of amaranth grain to the capital. It was the second most important crop in the empire, rivaling maize. But while maize was vulnerable to the unpredictable frosts and droughts of the high Mexican plateau, amaranth was the empire's ecological insurance policy. It was a climate-smart crop thousands of years before the term was invented. It could grow in soil so salty and dry that corn would wither in days. It could survive the thin air of the Andes and the sweltering humidity of the lowlands. This grain allowed the Aztec and Incan civilizations to expand into territories that were otherwise uninhabitable. It fed the warriors who marched across continents. It filled the state-managed granaries, the Petlacali, ensuring that even in the worst famines, the people of the sun would not starve. But for the Aztecs, amaranth wasn't just calories, it was the flesh of the gods. And to understand why the Spanish were so terrified of this plant, you have to understand the ritual of Tzoali. During the holy month of Panquetzalistli, the Aztec priests and women would gather the tiny, jewel-like amaranth seeds and grind them into a fine flour. They mixed this flour with toasted corn and the sweet, dark syrup of the maguey plant. The resulting dough was a dark, malleable paste that they called tzoali. But they didn't bake bread with it. Instead, they sculpted statues of their gods. They would mold this amaranth dough into life-size statues of Huitzilopochtli, the god of war and the sun. They would adorn these statues with precious feathers and turquoise. At the height of the festival, the statue would be paraded through the streets to the Templo Mayor, and then the ritual reached its climax, the sacrifice of the idol. The priests would break the amaranth god into small pieces and distribute them to the thousands of worshippers. By eating the tzoali, the people believed they were literally ingesting the strength, the vitality, and the immortality of their deity. It was a communal bond of the highest order. They used it to petition Tlaloc for rain and to honor the sacred mountains that provided their water. Amaranth was the bridge between the human stomach and the divine spirit. When Hernán Cortés and the Spanish clergy arrived in 1519, they didn't just see a new food, they saw a terrifying mirror. The Catholic friars watched the tzoali ceremony in horror. To them, it looked like a demonic mockery of the Holy Communion. The act of eating the physical manifestation of a god was too close to the Catholic Eucharist for comfort. They called it a pagan food full of sin. They realized that as long as the Aztecs had amaranth, they had their gods, and as long as they had their gods, they would never truly be conquered. The Spanish response was a systematic campaign of botanical genocide. They didn't just discourage the crop, they outlawed it. Under colonial law, the cultivation of amaranth became a capital offense, To enforce this, the Spanish implemented tactical biological warfare. They burned over 10,000 hectares of amaranth fields across the Mexican valleys. They destroyed the granaries. They told the indigenous farmers that if they were caught with so much as a handful of the tiny black seeds, their hands would be cut off or they would face the gallows. The goal was threefold. First, to dismantle the indigenous religion by removing its physical medium. Second, to impose European dependency by forcing the population to grow wheat and barley, seeds that the Spanish controlled. And third, to physically weaken the population. The Spanish had noted the exceptional stamina of the Aztec warriors. By removing amaranth from their diet, they were effectively unplugging the battery that powered the resistance. For 500 years, amaranth vanished from the maps. It was forgotten by the world, reduced to a weed that farmers cursed in their fields. But in the remote, high-altitude mountains of Oaxaca and the deepest valleys of the Andes, indigenous families performed a quiet act of resistance that lasted centuries. They grew small, clandestine plots in the middle of other crops and hid the seeds in clay jars buried beneath their floors. They kept the memory alive in a candy called alegría, which literally means joy, made of popped amaranth and honey. Fast forward to the 21st century, and modern science has finally opened the vault of amaranth, and what they found has left researchers in a state of shock. Amaranth is not a true cereal, like wheat or rice. It is a pseudo-cereal. It lacks the gluten that triggers inflammation in so many modern diets, but it possesses a biochemical profile that seems almost engineered for human survival. You see, most grains are chemically incomplete. Corn is missing certain amino acids. Wheat is missing corn. Lysine is almost non-existent, which is why grain-heavy diets often lead to metabolic deficiencies. Amaranth contains twice the lysine of wheat. It also contains more protein than rice or maize, and the quality of this protein means it's nearly 100% bioavailable, meaning the human body can use almost every gram it consumes. Then, there are the minerals. The industrial food system tells us we need bovine milk for calcium, but the numbers tell a different story. Amaranth leaves contain 215 milligrams of calcium per 100 grams. Whole milk contains 125 milligrams, meaning amaranth is nearly twice as dense in calcium as milk. It also contains 7.6 milligrams of iron per 100 grams, double the amount found in wheat and significantly more than the legendary iron levels of spinach. And it's the world's richest plant source of squalane. Squalane is a potent antioxidant and skin protectant usually harvested from the livers of deep-sea sharks. It is vital for protecting our cells from oxidative stress and radiation. Amaranth seeds are packed with it. This plant isn't just feeding the body, it's repairing it at a cellular level. But how did this highly nutritious weed that we are just beginning to understand survive 500 years of attempted extinction? Well, the answer lies in its internal engine, the C4 photosynthetic pathway. Most plants on Earth use the C3 pathway. When it gets too hot or too dry, C3 plants like wheat and rice begin to breathe inefficiently. They lose water through their pores in a process called photorespiration. Center proved that amaranth can tolerate soil salinity that would kill almost any other crop. It can grow in the marginal soils that industrial agriculture has abandoned. It is a climate-smart superfood that requires no synthetic fertilizers and almost no irrigation. This unique combination of traits, high nutritional density, rapid growth, and environmental hardiness, is exactly why amaranth is no longer just a peasant food in Mexico. It has become a cornerstone of NASA's space exploration program. The story of amaranth in space began in 1985 with Rodolfo Neri Vela, the first Mexican astronaut. When he joined the crew of the Space Shuttle Atlantis, he made a simple request. He wanted tortillas in his flight rations. NASA quickly realized something revolutionary. Traditional bread is a nightmare in microgravity because it produces crumbs. Those tiny crumbs can float into delicate electronic equipment, causing short circuits, or be inhaled by the crew, causing lung irritation. But tortillas made from amaranth grain are crumb-free. They are dense, flexible, and nutritionally superior to the traditional alternative. This sparked decades of research into Amaranthus as a space crop. Today, NASA studies amaranth as a primary component of its controlled ecological life support systems. In a closed-loop habitat on the Moon or Mars, every square inch of space is precious. You need a plant that does everything. And amaranth fits the bill. It grows from seed to harvest in just 90 days. A single plant can produce a pound of grain, and because it uses C4 photosynthesis, it is incredibly efficient at scrubbing CO2 from the air and pumping out fresh oxygen for the crew. It can be grown using recycled grey water, even using water recycled from human waste, because of its high salinity tolerance. And then there is the radiation. In deep space, astronauts are bombarded by cosmic rays that cause massive oxidative stress. The high levels of squalane and antioxidants found in amaranth act as a biological shield, helping the body repair the damage from space radiation in real time. The plant the Spanish tried to erase from the planet is now the very thing that will allow humanity to explore others. The global amaranth market is now exploding, projected to hit $24.48 billion by 2034. From the clean label health food stores of North America to the drought-stricken fields of Kenya, the world is finally remembering what the Aztecs always knew. In India and Nepal, where it is known as Rajgira, the king's seed, it is the go-to food for religious fasts. While in Africa, organizations are promoting it as a climate-resilient weapon against malnutrition, but the most important resurgence is happening in the small mountain villages of Mexico. For the indigenous farmers, growing amaranth is still an act of sovereignty. It is a refusal to be dependent on the big three crops, corn, wheat, and soy, that are owned by global corporations. You cannot patent amaranth. It has been reproducing freely for 8,000 years. You cannot kill it with drought, and you cannot stop it with laws. So, how do you use this knowledge? First, learn to identify it. It grows tall, with vibrant, plume-like flowers that range from deep purple to fiery red. The leaves are broad and green, often with a reddish tint. If you find it in your garden, don't spray it. Instead, harvest them young and sauté them with garlic. The grain is a powerhouse. You can pop it in a dry pan just like popcorn, and it turns into tiny, white, nutty clouds. Mix it with honey or agave to make your own alegría. Use the flour to boost the protein of your bread or pancakes. It is gluten-free, low glycemic, and likely packed with more minerals than almost any other food in your pantry.